Honored today to have two doctors with us. Dr. Lizbeth Klaus is a professor of sociology and a business professor at Willamette University, just south of Portland, Oregon. And our other doctor is Dr. Natalie Forrest, who's coming to us today from the Baltimore, Washington area. She's a psychologist. So we have a sociologist, and we have a psychologist. And we're going to be talking about people in business. It's a little bit unusual. We're going to learn a lot. Get ready to take notes. Welcoming Dr. Lizbeth Klaus and Dr. Natalie Forrest.
Hello, this is Ed Cohen, your broadcast host on Global TV unit of globalradiotalkshow.com. Our special guest today at this hour is Dr. Lizbeth Klaus, SPHR and GPHR, SHRM, SCP. I'm reading this. And she's a professor of management and global HR at the Atkinson Graduate School of Management at Willamette University in Oregon. Dr. Klaus specializes in the implications for global organizations when their employees cross borders. Dr. Klaus, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Tell us about your new book, Become an Awesome Manager.
Well, I really didn't intend to write this book because this is my 8th book, and I am retiring from Willamette University this year. And so after 25 years of teaching at the Monterey Institute and Willamette University, and my students were teasing me about what is the normal last lecture. And so I said, you know, retirement is not really my thing. So I'm not thinking about a last lecture. And they said, well, why don't you write down your notes into a book? And that should be your gift to us so that we can look at it after you're no longer teaching the core MBA course. Now, this course is being taught in many different places, in many MBA programs as organizational behavior and management. But what I found was over the last 25 years is how the traditional management concepts are still holding true, but that the context is changing and that most MBAs do not come out ahead of industry standards when it comes to progressive management practices that some of the larger companies like Amazon and Starbucks and a whole bunch of other companies, global companies especially. Well, you know, traditional management concepts have really been, you know, management has to be evidence-based, so you have to go through the research process and the refereed article process. And progressive companies have a certain agility in doing things and trying them out and testing them out and seeing whether they work, but they don't always follow the rigid academic, quote unquote, process of scientific development. And so over the years, I would always want to make sure that my students were ahead of industry standards. So I would always invite some industry guests to see, is what I'm teaching relevant to where my students are going to be going? And so 2 of my co-authors have been frequent guests, Peter Vermeulen, who used to be at Johnson & Johnson at Amazon, and Scott Baker, who was at Inrix in an IT company and is now with Command Alcon. And they would, so by the middle of the end of the semester, they would just come into my classroom, virtually or real, both actually, and they would kind of have an open discussion of what they were looking for in the skills that the students should have and what they were hoping. And the real point was always that most companies know that the soft side, quote unquote, of management, although management is not really necessarily soft, it's also evidence-based, but it's based on behavior. So behavior is much more difficult to codify than mathematics mathematics and science and other kinds of things. And so they would come into my class and they would say, you know, organizations, they say that management is important, but they are not really putting any emphasis on the managerial skills. And we have hundreds and hundreds of books on leadership, but we really don't have, and you know it when you work, you know whether you had a good manager or not. When you look back at your career and you know the people that were there to develop and support you, and then you know the people that just were good at what they're doing, but weren't really good at managing other people. And so this is how it actually came about.
HR practices in up till now, up to recently, have been quote unquote old fashioned as opposed to millennialized.
Well, I mean, we have Generation Z already. You know, we're already behind. We are now hiring the Generation Z rather than the millennials as well. You know, so I think what's really happening is that most of the management practices were developed for the third industrial revolution, and we all know that we have made a paradigm shift to the fourth industrial revolution. And this paradigm shift has been going on for a long time, but we were talking about the coronavirus and the impact. We now think that we live in this fourth industrial revolution because of the coronavirus. We don't, because the paradigm shift has been going on for the last 10 years. We've talked about the future of work and the new way of work and the new world. And the coronavirus has just provided us with that structural break because it has totally impacted how we work, which was already, I mean, remote work. I've been writing about remote work for the last 10 years and people say, oh yeah, you know, that's okay, but we're not really doing that, all right? Or, oh, you know, but there's lots of research that already come out about remote work. It just wasn't a practice that was fully adapted. Now, we knew that the numbers were there because before the coronavirus, it was pretty much shown that 1 out of 2 jobs can easily be done remote. And we also knew that the freelancer, the gig economy was there. But now it's also coming into sharper focus because of this structural break that we have through the virus. The paradigm shift was already in action.
If I could ask you about cross-border global assignments. Now, global can mean right now, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but global can mean being here in the US and working internationally virtually.
Correct. And this has been, we've seen this paradigm shift in global HR. You can actually have a global career at home because, first of all, we are impacted by the global supply chain, by every, you know, we are, whether we like it or not. I mean, there's pro and anti-globalization trends, but we are in a global virtual world, and the tools were there, but we weren't fully utilizing them, because we were still saying, you know, let's just travel somewhere. And, you know, obviously face to face will always be very, very important. I mean, that's, so sure. In our book, what we are saying, and based on a comment you made before, the old traditional is not bad. It is still with us, right? But we need to kind of zigzag, which is the title of another book that I wrote, Zigzag HR. We need to look at the evidence-based good practices that are still adding value today and hopefully continuing to do them. And then we need to let go of those that don't add value anymore because we live in a different context. And it's not just because we've always done them. We just need to move on and say, we're no longer going to do this. And in HR, this is especially important. We're doing, you know, let's look at performance appraisals. Well, we've perfected it for 25 years, 30 years. And then we did it because we've always done it, but there's new ways of doing things. Now, we also, when we let go of what no longer add value and add continue to do what really does add value, we also need to think of what new innovative things do we need to do to transform ourselves. I mean, the biggest example right now is in learning and development. I mean, I think we are looking at the impact of this structural break on HR, but we really need to look at the impact on learning and development, because everything now that companies were doing in running seminars and having conventions and doing, it is now all available for free. And so that has totally been disrupted as an industry, right? Because
Yes.
people are now, what are we going to do with learning and development to reinvent ourselves? And so that's one thing, because all these big HR influencers that were there, their business has been disrupted. I mean, I have been traveling at least once a week for 45 years, and suddenly I have been home for, so it was like, you cannot, my business model 10 years ago was based on in-person going somewhere. If that is your business model today, that will not continue to be, and we'll have to reinvent that. And are we ready for that? We're now all scrambling, because online education, for example, by the universities, it's not the same as face-to-face. We are not going to go back to fully the face-to-face, because people now know that working 1 or 2 days a week at home is perfectly good. Maybe I don't want to be there 5 days a week at home, right? But I also don't want to be in that 2-hour commute anymore, just to go to an office to sit behind my computer. So it is dramatically going to impact the expectations of the worker. And
we have that experience also, producing several meetings, San Francisco, San Jose, LA, New York, Washington, all just since January 1 through the end of February. And all that is impossible to do, at least for the next 6 or 7 months. So what we're trying to do is to do more of this kind of talk show interview.
But there's such a fatigue on this. I sit from 5:30 in the morning till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I sit from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting talking with people. And the people behind, they cannot absorb all that information. And that's why in our book, we have a modular approach for bite-sized learning. You don't want to read a book from the cover and front to end. You want to read particular parts. So pedagogically, we have designed it that you can spend 15-20 minutes a day, reading something and then applying it right away, absorbing it, developing those metacognitive skills that, by the way, only 10% of the people have metacognitive skills to be able to learn on their own without that face-to-face
What's
interaction.
that word again? Meta what?
Metacognitive skills, the way by which we learn. And so in the introduction, actually, I expand a lot on how do people learn, and how do they learn best, and how do they take concepts that are management concepts, are really part of our daily vocabulary, but they mean different things. You have to be able to conceptualize it, you have to be able to measure it. So the book uses this pedagogy of hybrid learning by yourself, learning by interacting, learning by reading, learning by watching a video, learning by, this hybrid flipped learning, all these kinds of methodologies that have been in education for many, many years, but nobody really applied them because they wanted to fill a classroom or they wanted to fill a hotel room with 50 people being face-to-face and having food and drinks in the experience, right? The learning experience is totally different.
Networking and sharing ideas in a social environment.
Yes. And so the biggest challenge now is how can we online not just be a talking head, which is what we are right now, talking heads. How can we online keep the interest of the people so that they can learn a bite, they can take a bite, they can digest it, they can apply it.
So let's go back to Zigzag and relate that to the role of the CHRO today and a month from now as the back to work becomes more popular?
Well, obviously now actually at the beginning of I just follow, the influencers in the field, because obviously that's part of where I'm at as well. And in the beginning, 6 weeks ago, is where you start seeing around March 10, you start seeing a lot of blogs and writing about the coronavirus. And it was all about how, now people suddenly realize that we're important, right? I'm very skeptical about this lip service that we are important. I know we are important. I've been in HR for 45 years. I know it's important. It's my passion. It's my life. However, when other people say how important we are, I'm not being impressed by that, right? What I now see, now that we are reopening, that we are suddenly becoming the doers again. Okay, what's the plan for reentry? What's the administrative? How many people do we need to lay off? What is our, so we are again back into this rut, right? You know me enough to know that I am very passionate about HR, but the title of Zigzag HR is why the best HR is no longer HR.
So it's strategy, business strategy and marketing.
It's really adding, it's knowing the management disciplines, because every discipline has something to offer. It's knowing psychology, it's knowing sociology, it's knowing data, it's knowing behavioral economics. It is being able to integrate all the knowledge that's out there and to apply it to human behavior. I mean, behavioral sciences have given us a lot of insights in human behavior, and we see niche market companies that are doing that, and they're doing that very, very well, either in data or in behavioral economics. But we don't see the professional organizations really looking at how can we engage, how can we find the sweet spot between what's good for the company and good for the worker.
Yeah.
All right.
So in my conversation with Peter Vermillion a couple of months ago, we focused in on his worldwide experience, Amazon.
Yes.
Their massive capability at the time.
Their scalability. I mean, they are now hiring 100,000 people a month.
I don't know how they do that. I can't figure that out. I just have no concept.
You can't figure that out? Yes, you can, because you can use artificial intelligence. They can, I mean, and it's not just Amazon doing it. In a previous paper last summer, a white paper that I wrote is called Dynamic Open Talent, that I wrote with Danielle Monahan from Uber. What we did is we looked at 5 companies that are having extremely weird practices for somebody like you and I who have been in global HR companies like Amazon, companies like Unilever, companies like Uber, companies like Siemens, old, traditional and old companies, but who have truly understood how to marry the behavioral people soft components with the artificial intelligence. I mean, the people that are going to come out of this disruption are going to be able to use technology to their advantage. I mean, you see the industries, the technology companies are doing very, very well as a result of this structural break right now. But how are we able to scale? And the reaction that I get, I mean, Unilever has 1 million applications a year, and they do it all through artificial intelligence, through companies like Gloat in Israel, the big support, in architecture support of that. And so they're doing that. Now you say, what people say to me is, but well, I'm just an HR person in a company of, 3,000 people. I don't have these kinds of tools. But it's not just about the tools, because the tools are really available. I mean, you and I can Zoom without even having a Zoom subscription, right? I mean, they're available there, but it's just the cultural gap that we have in adopting all these new technology. And it requires what you and I, grew up was T-shaped knowledge, very in-depth expertise on something, global HR or whatever, and then a broader expertise on a variety of things. Now we have to have M-shaped knowledge. We have to have now in-depth expertise. I mean, the best way that Peter always talks about it is what is your BTO, all right? What is your business knowledge? What is your technology knowledge? And then what is your operational knowledge in HR, right? But we've talked about analytics now, HR people analytics for 15 years, and most people still can't read a spreadsheet or do a statistical analysis on the numbers that they have, right? Now, yeah, we can hire niche consultants to do that work and specialized people, but that's not how, that's good if that's the only thing you can do, but you have to integrate all that knowledge with your business knowledge, with your HR knowledge. And so this is where our book really comes in becoming an awesome manager. It is not just being able to be good at one thing. It is a variety of different things that we integrate and then surround ourselves with our team of people who have T-shaped expertise in a variety of subject matters that we don't have as depth and expertise in. So it is really a question of never stop learning, lifelong learning, because we truly believe that the biggest advancement in behavior of people, engaging people, is going to come from disciplines outside of HR. Because HR has remained, even if they have a seat at the table, as we used to say, they still have remained a very T-shaped expertise. And so we want to broaden that. And so that, those three publications are all about how can we integrate knowledge that's out there, integrate knowledge from other sectors as well. I mean, there's lots of good stuff going on in the nonprofit sector, in the NGO. What can we learn from that and adapt to the corporate sector, to the government sector? I mean, so it's about experiment, test, small scale. It's not about your big academic studies. I mean, we see this in the coronavirus. It's about running, 100 experiments on developing a vaccine and seeing which one is going to, and it's going to be about not each working separately, but working together and sharing that data. How come that now we can have medical research, refereed research come out in 2 or 3 weeks, when it used to take medical journals 1.5 years to publish something? Suddenly we can reduce the cycle time for that.
Yeah,
right?
there seems to be certain fast track going on immediately.
And so this is also in HR. I mean, I really like, and this is the contribution that Peter and Scott really brought, is like, okay, we have this idea, it makes logical sense, let's test it, let's do A/B testing, one group we do this, the other group do that, let's see if it works, can we scale it, can we do it right now, can we abandon it if it doesn't work, right? What do we learn from it? Even a failed experiment is a good experiment because it didn't work. And that's where the whole behavioral economics really comes in. People management is about human behavior, right? It's about human behavior, and so a better understanding of human behavior. I mean, in the last couple of years, I have probably read more psychology because I'm a sociologist. So I wasn't thinking in a psychological matter because I was trained as a sociologist. And so what can I learn from the other behavioral sciences that are helping me ultimately, it is still people, even with artificial intelligence, it is still people that are doing the work in many ways, right?
So we are joined now, incidentally, by Dr. Natalie Forrest, who's in the Baltimore area. Dr. Natalie, let me introduce you to Dr. Lizbeth, who's in Oregon.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hey, wow, you're on the other side of the continent. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Thank you for being on the show. So we were just talking about the role, the expanding role of HR, and Dr. Klaus just seconds ago mentioned the idea of psychological impact on people management and things like that. So Lisbeth, Natalie is a specialist, and she's a psychologist, of course, and PhD and an author as well. And she has spoken at my meetings. And I asked her to join early so you guys can meet. We're talking about the impact today of people management and how it's changed so different, and the impact, the broadened impact within HR of utilizing non-HR skills. In other words, psychological skills, design thinking, analytics, things like that. So your timing is perfect. Would you say so, Dr. Klaus?
Yes, yes, nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you. I'm sorry I missed some of the conversation, but I'll definitely catch it later, and then maybe we can connect as well.
Well, I see that you have your books. Maybe I should leave my book out there too.
Yes, of course.
Absolutely. What's your book about?
It's Becoming an Awesome Manager. It's between everything is on leadership. What we're really looking for is that person who helps you in your team direct your work, how can they do a better job at that?
Yes, absolutely. It's actually interesting because that's what I call a leader. And, a lot of people mix manager and leader.
Yes.
But what you're saying sounds absolutely true. Yes, they have to be right there with the team. Yes. Yes.
So Dr. Forrest has spoken in our meetings in the past and on our talk show about patterns, people patterns, and how they are everywhere, right? At work, at home. And now with the disruption of the virus and working from home and confusion and worry about what's coming next, how can patterns be thought through? I mean, I can't even say the words. I'm stumbling there. And what's going to happen?
Well, I think we're living in such an interesting time where the overriding pattern right now is probably fear on all sides of the issue, right? And the question is, where does the fear come from and how do we deal with it? So there are patterns that we all have. There's, of course, in psychology, the fright or flight, or the stress. And however we react to it, I think especially for managers or for leaders right now, it's so crucial to tap in and really connect with the employees, with the team. And they have to really ask what is going on, because whatever fear or worry there was before in a team is now going to bubble up because we don't have the face-to-face anymore. And so when it comes to patterns right now, we really have to finally, I want to say, appreciate everybody as an individual and how they then connect. So this is a great time, I think, for leaders, for managers to go in and really get to know their team members, because all of them have patterns at home. They have patterns in their subconscious mind. And now they're trying to create new patterns in this new work environment. And it's a completely different ballgame.
Dr. Klaus?
I find it very interesting. When I heard the word pattern, I took it from a sociological perspective. And so actually, one of the metacognitive skills that we talk about in our book is instead of looking at situations as individual stories, is to look at the patterns in the stories. And so, so again, a holistic approach to identifying, and because unless you can identify the pattern, you really can come up with solutions that are that are going to work from situation to situation with some adaptations. So.
I love that. I love that. That is exactly what I'm talking about. So absolutely, you got to look at the patterns in between. So, for example, if somebody's really afraid of, that fear factor, or worried about using a computer, they've already been overwhelmed to some degree at the office, even if it was just using Microsoft Word. Well, now, in addition to Microsoft Word or something of that sort, they also need to do some kind of online meeting system, and they might have to use their email more. So that fear, that pattern of, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about the online or the computer environment, that fear stems from somewhere. And so when I talk about the hidden power of patterns, is really figuring out where does that come from, and that it keeps bubbling up. And what I have found sociologically or psychologically or just through life experience is that it's something that happens somewhere in your life, and it's right here in the back of your head. It might have been something that you grew up with, where your parents have said, well, computers are evil, and that is stuck. Or you've always been told that you're really bad at electronics, and that of course gets amplified and amplified. And so, yes, you look at what is the fear, what's the root cause, and then how has it been acting up? And that's, tracing backwards. I think I absolutely agree with you. This is what's been happening every time. If you're in HR, every time that I ask you to do something on the computer, you freak out or you delay. So what is going on? And then that's where the leader comes in, right? Saying, okay, what's going on? And I've never complained about you using. So that's where all of that soft skill approach comes in.
Well, especially now as we are working from home situations, and the home situations has many different patterns. Obviously, I don't have any children at home anymore at my age. I have a cat and a dog, and so, but people are doing their work in environments where they don't have the space to work, the various members of the family, the kids learning from school, the parent being there. And I'm really afraid that we are going to develop a pattern where the role of all these taking care of will fall on the women in the household.
Yes.
And so we are overburdening them with the work that they need to do in an uncertain environment, with new tools, new environments, new expectations. Fear maybe also of losing their job, because a lot of the jobs now are work packages. Is my job still a sum of work packages that the company is willing to pay for, now that their business is also, diminished? And so all that fear together, and I don't think that the managers have the skills right now. It depends from manager to manager to support that kind of work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I love that. I think we're on the same page here. So I love it, because that's what I also talk about when it comes to leaders, right? Really having those soft skills, or, the appreciative inquiry. I mean, there are all these terms out there, but in the end, what it is it's really connecting with each individual team member. And yes, right now, I mean, I can speak to that. I have an almost 9-year-old. I'm homeschooling right now. I have the benefit, though, of having been a teacher and having taught teachers. So I understand the work that goes into it, and I understand how I can wiggle her and help her. But I cannot imagine how difficult it is if you never had to teach, or if you've never had the benefit of teaching. And now all of a sudden, your kid, depending on where you are, has between no face-to-face time with the teachers to maybe 3 hours a day, but it's interrupted. So the parents are trying, like, I have a meeting right now. Luckily, my daughter also has a meeting. But, in between is like making dinner, creating my courses, and training and talking to clients. And what comes into that fear and elevates that fear is the judgment that we have taken on, the individual self-judgment, right? It's like, well, a mom is supposed to blah, 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 blah. And then what if you fall short? And that comparison and that competition, instead of saying, I'm doing the best I can, and that has to be it. And that's where women or any employee right now needs the support from management, from the leadership of saying, I get it. I may not have children, but I hear what it's like, you know, or even, I mean, not even the children, just all of a sudden you have your spouse at home with you the whole time. You know, it's a different ball game. I mean, it's like the time where you really get to know each other, especially if you're in complete lockdown or complete quarantine, and not just, you know, I can leave a couple of times. So it's a discovery of the patterns we have and what we might want to change in order to move to the next phase.
I think it's a total time of rediscovery, not in companies as well as at home.
Yes.
What about the mental health issue? I mean, you've already described it while talking, but it's really getting exacerbated, and the fear factor of working from home and having the boss see or learn more about you outside of the office, that could be disconcerting. I suppose it could work positively as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, it is where this is a time, if you look at it positively, like I try to do, of reawakening, right? Of redefining who we are. You know, I've been playing this role. Do I really want this? Do I not? On the other hand, of course, I mean, it's trauma. It's not just trauma for the kids, but it's trauma for the employees, in the sense of, can I still perform the way that I did? I can't even leave the house. I have no way of contacting a person that used to sit 3 cubicles, I don't know, left of me, to ask a question. Who do I ask? Will my boss find out that I don't know the answer to that? And in this, I think there's a need to reawaken, in a sense, or rediscover, what is the company really about? And you've heard me talk about this before, where very often we have a company that has a wonderful vision and mission, but somewhere in the trickle down effect, nobody gets that vision anymore. And the employees are no longer really engaged stakeholders. And I think it's a good thing that needs to be reconnected, so that the employees know that they're respected, they're valued, they're recognized for what they're doing. That'll ultimately help the company. But if that's missing, then yes, there's a huge trauma effect. I think what I talked with a friend of mine was, we're probably going to see a lot of marriages dissolve, and we're probably going to see a whole lot of kids being born.
Yes. We're also going to see a whole lot of people probably moving jobs afterwards and saying, hey, reevaluating what is it really they want to do in their lives. Now, talking about remote work, as we have, last year we studied companies that had really leading practices in remote work. And what we were so surprised of is how much energy and really science they put into selecting their remote workers, into training them, into onboarding them, into supporting them, in the duty of care for them working at home, making sure they had rooms set up and checklists and home visits. And I mean, these companies were just phenomenal. One of them is Workday, who has 50% of their workers that work from home or on client sites. And so in this particular situation, we just sent the people on Friday at home, and on Monday we told them, hey, just start being productive and do what you, without any support. And so, of course, that was a different situation, but we can see how it was sink or swim, really, in that particular situation.
Absolutely, and you're right. There are some companies who do that very well, and they also have that connection, right? Leadership with the team. Everybody knows what the situation is. Now it's not just that all of a sudden you're home, but you may not have the space. So where are you going to set this up? And there are a lot of distractions at home. I mean, whether we like it or not, it's much easier at home to get up and see what's in the fridge than when you work. And that self-discipline, it's very interesting because when I used to teach online as well. And it comes back now in that same kind of advice that we used to give students. Don't take an online class if you are not good at managing your time, right? You can't. I mean, you got to set parameters. And so you have to know, I'm in the office from 5 to whatever, from 3 to 9. And really, really, that's a lot of self-discipline, which we can train ourselves to do, especially with the help of good leaders. And then at the same time, though, if we're really looking at it, like you said, this was different. There was no time for training. And we've got kids at home. We've got spouses at home. We may not have a second computer at home. So how do we split up the time? It can be very traumatic. And at the same time, like I said, you know, whether it's the companies who train well, now is the time for leaders to really rise and help the employees, help the team members. And that'll just have a very positive effect on the overall organization that we're talking about.
Now, the other concern that I do have actually is when obviously we, in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, who knows what the timeline is, we will get back to a next normal or whatever we want to call it. Will companies remember the sacrifices that everybody made? Or will they just, the sacrifices they made, because at the beginning of the virus, I was heavily involved with modeling compensation plans. How long can we stay open, paying the people that we are, you know, looking at our payroll, that's 50 to 60% of our operations, of our overall budgets, how much, and no income coming in, how long can we, so modeling, how long can we survive? Can we negotiate with our workers a furlough? Can we negotiate a pay reduction, etc.? And everybody was really working together to make that happen. I was very, very impressed. But then I was thinking, yeah, I remember the early 90s. I remember the 2000 crash. I remember, and we went back and did everything the way, you know, capitalism is supposed to work, right? And forgot the sacrifices that some of the people had made. And so I think that we're going to probably, there's going to be a greater demand by the millennial generation, who's really the big sufferer from all of this. You know, they're graduating without internships, without job opportunities right now. I mean, they're really in a difficult situation. Gen Z coming in, and they're probably going to demand a new form of capitalism. I don't know what name I give it, but it's going to be, it is not going to be as extreme. And you look at the gig workers, I mean, for the first time, I mean, we have written about the gig workers. Yeah, it's great. And, you know, you're freelancing, but you don't have benefits. You don't have this, you don't have that. You have freedom, you like it, you know, but, you know, we're going to have to come to some new models, not just employee versus independent contractor, but a whole array of different work arrangements with some safety nets associated with it. So,
well, I believe that also, if I could just interject for a second here, that there has to be a new social contract, that's a meld of some kind with people being taken care of. National health was an issue in the politics this year, and now all of a sudden it's here, whether we like it or not, it's here. Guaranteed some kind of a base income. That's what the stimulus checks are all about. Not a lot of money, but at least you're getting something. Yep. So it's already here. So I think
we talk extensively about in the new world of work, which is our introductory module. We talk extensively about the role of the individual, the role of HR, the role of the society, you know, at different levels of operations, and ideas like universal guaranteed income, without making any judgments on it, just like looking at robot tax, all kinds of new forms by which that social contract, what does it really mean today? And not just in the US, but in different countries around the world, because we're seeing it right now in Europe. I mean, you know, the unions are especially in highly unionized countries like France and Belgium and Germany, they're already, if you follow the news, boycotting many of the re-entries just because it's back to what it used to be rather than a more progressive form of social enterprise.
Absolutely. And the key here, I think, is not whether we're talking about the economic system of capitalism. It really goes to the heart of what philosophy underlies our actions, right? And the United States happens to be built on the idea of individualism. And so it has always been a very different approach. And so when you look at other countries, very often you have more of that community-based idea. And of course, that has evolved into more of the unions and other things. If you look at some of the countries in Europe, you're absolutely right. Some of the unions are very strong. And at the same time, there almost seems to be more of an understanding of the relationship between the government, the economy, and the people. Whether right or wrong, but there's a different kind of approach to it. And I see it live because my brother lives in Spain and my mother lives in Germany. So I get it from all sides. And it's very interesting to see how people react and what governments do and how people act accordingly. And so absolutely, there is a need for a change. And it's sort of what I've been advocating and what I hear you say as well. It can't be CEO or founder, CEO, and the rest. It has to be more of a holistic group coming together. We no longer want to just fill jobs and then people, like 87% are actively disengaged because they don't feel a connection to what they got hired for anymore. So it's where that leadership comes in and where we need to have everybody talk to one another. I always say, the 3 R's, the relationship between every individual member of an organization, but especially in a team. And then the respect that you have for the individual and their needs as well as their skills and abilities. And then how do we recognize that? So there is a shift going on. And when we get back to whatever this new normal is, it's almost like in times of the Industrial Revolution, right? We come back and now all of a sudden you have equipment to work with that you never had. So there are these challenges, and absolutely there will have to be a change. The companies that are able to make that change happen will be sustained, and others will have to, I guess, change or make room.
I don't want to bring politics into this, although it's certainly going to enter it someday in the next 6 months. But we have to make that change, or else we'll face the French Revolution here. I think.
Yes.
There's so many people who are not being taken care of, right?
Right. Yes.
It's going to backfire, and
yeah,
it's going to shake things up.
And I think that is something that that this crisis or this reawakening time has really shown us. I think a lot of people, because we're so focused on our lives, we're entrenched in our lives, right? And all of us are in one way or another. Even if we watch the news and get socially informed and all that, there are things we're not fully aware of. And so now all of a sudden with this, there are a lot of things that have come up that we're going, whoa, I never knew it was like this. Whether it is, like you mentioned, the benefits, the payroll benefits, or whether it's healthcare, where all of a sudden we're looking around, we're going, wow, we don't actually have what I need. Or just, something that's very dear to my heart, the fact that there are so many kids whose only meal is at school and now the schools are closed. How do we deal with that?
In the New York Times today, there's thousands. I had no idea about that.
And they're homeless students. I work with somebody else on that issue, but it's, if you all of a sudden this crisis, this period that we're in shows us where are we. It's like taking inventory. This is where we are. It's not good or bad. This is where we are. This is what we have created. Now, what do you want to do next? Which of these things do you want to keep? Which of these things do you want to change? And that's the big chance that we have right now. And of course, with every chance or change, there's fear, because whether it's good or bad for us, we've gotten used to it and we're comfortable with it. And all of a sudden you're telling me my job might change. Maybe my taxes are going to rise. Maybe this, maybe this, maybe that. And all of a sudden we have to reevaluate where we are and where we want to be. That's huge.
So, Dr. Forrest, I see that you have a new book about healthcare professionals.
Oh, that one. Yes. Well, I think that came out late last year. It's about helping people understand the performance of healthcare professionals, and it all has to do with performance. So what I have found is exactly what you also mentioned, the interconnection between leadership and managers and the team. Very often, and I just picked healthcare professionals, by the way, it applies to a lot more areas, but I woke up one day, quote unquote, because I had to call my health insurance, and they asked me for the invoice number. They asked me for my membership number. It took like 10 minutes until they asked me for my name. And then they went down the list of this, and this, and I never really got a human answer. And so what I did in that is I looked at the other side of the representatives that we end up talking to on the phone, and the pressures that they're under. I mean, help desk or representing a company. Nowadays, you have a script. You have to read that script. And then you have to say, well, I can't help you anymore. Would you like me to talk to my manager? And, there are all these scripts, but the human relation is lost. And we have seen a lot of healthcare companies really losing money because by word of mouth, the clients, the patients are saying, you know what, they don't care about me. They don't care about me, so I'm just going to go someplace else and try something else. And I simply focus on healthcare professionals because of that, as well as the idea that when it comes to especially healthcare, you need that interaction. You need to feel that somebody cares about you. And the performance shouldn't be based on how many calls did you handle today. It really needs to be dealt with how many people did you help today. And so that's sort of the come from of that book. It's a collection really more of quotes and leadership tips, where again, I go back to the 3 R's all the time. We need to know what our people are going through in any kind, and especially help desk or representatives that we call on the phone. I don't know what's going on in their lives, but sometimes I have to apologize if I'm getting really antsy with them.
I'm going to take the devil's advocate approach here. What we talk about in our book is about the tier 1 questions of HR, right? That maybe we are better off having a chatbot answering those questions than we are having an HR person answering those questions. So we have seen this in dynamic open talent in most of the companies that we do surveys with employees. Would you rather have an HR person answering that question, or would you rather have immediately the chatbot answering that question? That not only Unilever has Una, the chatbot, she's been robotized as a female answering questions with the name of the company, that 1 million questions a year are answered by the chatbots much more proficiently. To take the HR out of the cycle is actually improving the customer satisfaction. So that just made me think about that in your analysis of your everybody who has been on a phone with their insurance company can feel that pain.
Yeah.
Well, Lisbeth, it's the time for engagement now, isn't it, in organizations?
I think that was the third industrial revolution. That was engagement. Today, it's the time for experience. How do you experience, and Jacob Morgan talks about that, how is your experience with the various touch points in your company? How is your experience with your manager? How is your experience with your coworker? How is your experience with the system? How is the experience with the technology? How is your experience with the culture? It is not just about, we know engagement studies, we know that there are like 8-9 characteristics that make up engagement, right? And that's different for everybody else. But what is your experience as a worker with the stakeholders of that company? And how can we improve that experience from a personal perspective, a technological perspective, a cultural perspective?
Yeah, that's psychological, isn't it?
Well, it's also technological. It's got a variety of other components, because in the future of work, a lot of the work will be taken over by artificial intelligence. I mean, we're not going to fight. We're not going to win that battle. I mean, there's a lot of people say, "Oh, no, this," but it is actually done at a higher quality. It's scalable. It's not always for everyone. I mean, obviously, I'm still going to go to my local coffee shop and order a cup of coffee and hopefully have a person who knows me and says, "Hi, how are you today?" All right. Those are different experiences, because that's not scalable. But as soon as something becomes scalable in a company, it's just, the world without work is where we're going.
It's back.
How are we then going to how are people going to make meaning out of life when most of the meaning is involved in their jobs right now? I mean, that's a whole other conversation for another topic that we could easily talk about, because this is where it's coming. We're going to have a bipolar kind of jobs that absolutely need to still be done by hand, right? I mean, I come from the retail industry, for many, many years, and people were appalled at the self-checkout, right? And they said, "Oh, we don't want to self-checkout. They just want to automate this, make this cheaper. They don't want to take the labor cost, I mean, it makes all sense, right?" But those self-checkouts today are longer than the personal checkouts, because we don't want that physical distance, right? So you just, I'm not trying to, I always go to the extremes of things to make a point, right? I mean, I like personal interaction, but I also know that many things are scalable and probably better done through artificial intelligence and robotization.
It's interesting because, of course, on the one hand, yes, you're absolutely right. On the other hand, is that the way we want to go? And I mean, we talk about user experience even, in this kind of format. Do I like this program better than this? What does the interface look like? And I think part of the reason why we have gone that route so much is because of that underlying fear of having real relationships. And what I mean by that is, if you'd rather have a chat box, but answer your question about HR, and you probably have to ask 2, 3, 4 times before it finds the right answer and all of that, right?
But chatbot is not a phone system, all right? It is actually a humanized voice that responds to your questions.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. I have them on one of my apps, and I despise it from the bottom of my heart, because I still need to go through the process. To me, it has to do with the fear of being open and vulnerable. I mean, why can you not have a good relationship with HR that you can go in there, it's confidential, and you can ask them a question, and that HR is going to
have an answer to that, actually.
Okay.
Why can't you have a good relationship with HR? Because HR in the last 10 years, we don't know who the customer of HR was. Was it the person, the employee, or was it the company and the executives, right? I mean, you can have your best relationship with HR, but when it comes to laying you off, the customer is the company and not the employee, right?
Well,
now,
absolutely.
From another perspective as well, what I'm more fearing, you fear the fear that of lack of personal contact. What I'm fearing is that we are developing a two-tiered society where, based on socioeconomic class, income, education, and occupation, you are actually going to be able to afford this face-to-face.
Absolutely, and I think
And
that's
the other one is going to have the other product, you know. So there are many ethical and other issues that are which we also don't explore enough, the ethical issues of technology.
but I would actually say that that's where we are right now. I don't think that's what we're developing. I think that's where we are right now, where we see some people can afford going to a place to have a consult and others can't. So they need to do the online thing and try and figure it out. So we already have the socioeconomic breakdown of those who can and those who cannot. And I think what this time right now is showing us is that it's not working. We're leaving hundreds of thousands of millions of people behind. So what can we do? And so I politely agree to disagree, because I think the human experience is exactly what we need in order to be able to move forward. And I have a lot of people, you know, that I know that work in AI. They're wonderful people, and some of the stuff that they create is amazing. And yet, just when I go online and I see that little box pop up, or, you know, I know that I'm waiting for this person to answer, and I know they're not going to get it right, and I have to retype it and retype it and retype it. By that time, I'm no longer having a good experience, as cute and cuddly as that chatbot might be. You know? So, and I think it's also, you know, the way that you grow up. I'm sure that there are a lot of, especially millennials, who, and I know some of them, they're okay with just doing everything online. They're fine with it. But there are also many who are sick and tired of it. So it's finding a balance of that, and a balance that is not based on socioeconomics, but in my opinion, and I'm not saying that I have all the answers by any means, but it has to be with the relationship. I'm much more willing to use a chatbot if I know why it's created and who's behind it, and that it is confidential, and that Google or Microsoft or Yahoo is not tracking my answer, versus maybe if I don't know it, I won't do it. So I think it still comes back to integrity and respect.
Transparency.
Yeah.
Well, we've been all over the place. Get us back into the groove.
Yeah, well, I've really enjoyed this. I've learned a lot from you ladies, and thank you very much for doing this on Global TV, which is a new product that we're launching.
That's awesome.
Someday we'll be back in Baltimore area and Washington, and we'll get you on our program. And someday we'll be in the Portland, Seattle area again. But for the meantime, this is it. And so I'm learning how to do this. And thank you for being our guest today, Dr. Lizbeth Klaus and Dr. Natalie Forrest.
Thank you so much.
So Dr. Klaus, family background is Belgian, and you're from German background, right?
Yes, yes.
That's cool. It's a
I
great.
know. We meet again. The Europeans are coming back.
Well, we can't go to Europe right now, so we have to meet here, correct?
Well, this way, right?
All right. So thank you very much, ladies. We'll get you a linkage back to this show in some time, as soon as Paul and I do the editing. And until next time, please come back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you. Okay, we're done.
Okay, we're done.
Anyway, I wanted you guys just to meet and go from there, because I had a feeling that there would be a good connection.
I believe so. Yeah, I'll definitely want to reach out to you.
Yeah, and can you send me the cover of your books, Natalie? Because I'm
Yes.
good. Ed, do you need a picture of the cover of the books? So,
Yeah, if you could send me a JPEG,
yeah.
PDF, that would be great.
Will do.
And, you know, Natalie, if you have a white paper or a new book cover coming out, or a new tape or on a CD or whatever,
Okay.
you know, let me have that in a JPEG also,
Okay.
because I'll be building a PR page connected with all this.
Awesome. Yeah.
I want to display all of that material.
Cool. Yeah, we'll do. Sure. You'd put a lot of work in it.
This is cool. Well, I like doing this.
Yeah.
And, so in the future, I'll tell you what, I thought we'd have another person on, but he did not choose to do this. So our business model has changed totally, and now we're going into being a media company,
Mm-hmm.
and then applying all this to industry. So that means getting co-sponsors. So have a co-sponsor like a bank or a relocation company or somebody,
Right.
say now a word from XYZ Mortgage, you know. And
Yes.
so they'll pay me some money, and in return for them meeting you or putting an ad on this thing.
Right.
And then we're going to be doing a whole series of these. And then the plan, not done yet, is to continuously upgrade the production value. So I'm in a meeting with, in a conversation meeting with a couple of Hollywood producers who are retired guys, and they like what I'm doing, and they've given me a proposal to professionally produce this kind of a thing.
Oh, cool.
But it costs a bunch of money, so
Of course.
we're playing with this to test it and get me
Yeah.
more comfortable doing it
Yeah.
and learning how to work it.
Yeah.
But we'll be doing a number of these broadcasts and put them up on our site for free access, free download, and then I'll be promoting them. So it's a public relations vehicle, and if we can monetize it somehow, I'll be glad to share the revenue, if there is any, with our guests.
Mm-hmm.
So it could turn out to be a training module
Right.
on a pay-per-view basis per topic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not there yet.
Mm-hmm. While you were just talking at the local meeting here in DC, I want to say it was September last year, there was a company, Zeus. I think they were called Zeus. Have you heard of them?
What's that, a housing company?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was corporate lodging, apartments.
Yeah, exactly. Because they were trying to expand, and again, you know, might not, but that might be a group you want to reach out if you're looking for sponsors. Because
Yeah.
I know they only had a few locations, and they were trying to find more locations where they could go into. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. As a matter of fact, I was on one of these yesterday.
Yeah.
The guy from a property company called National Corporate Housing,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of a broker finding places to live for people around the world.
Right.
And that guy asked me to put together one of these with business travel and, you know, business travel, buyers of business travel in
Mm-hmm.
organizations about what they need to have in their choice of properties in which to put people who
Mm-hmm.
would be on business travel rather than long-term assignment.
Right.
And he said he'd be willing to help fund it. So who knows? Maybe there's a way to go there.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
So Lisbeth, how's Carol Osby doing? I haven't spoken with her in a while.
Well, she's doing fine. We postponed our conference obviously to October, so from March to October. But we are starting actually based on the book. The book was written to have 3 6-week learning tools. And so we're starting that in June. And so 3 times a year, we're going to offer continuing education like that. So
In a video format?
pardon me?
In a video format?
In a Zoom or Microsoft Teams. It's probably going to be either Microsoft Teams or Zoom. We're going to see, depending if there's too many Microsoft people that are joining, we'll do Microsoft Teams. I like Microsoft Teams a little bit better than Zoom, but most people are using Zoom. So,
So
what it would be is 6 weeks. So you have a pre-entry assignment. You read a chapter of the book. It's kind of a virtual book club. if you want to. You read a chapter of the book. We have with the book 300 interactive exercises. So you enter something, and we've tested this for 5 years. These entry tickets to the seminar, we have artificial intelligence that provides a customized version of the PowerPoint as a result of it. So we have a PowerPoint with 10,000 slides. And so based on the answers of what people already knew in that particular cohort, it customizes which slides we have to cover more rather than less, because they didn't understand that. So we are beta testing it in June and rolling it out fully in September. And it's going to be for the 150 companies in the Seattle area.
Awesome.
Again, we're not interested in making money. I mean, I'm retired, so it doesn't really matter. We're just interested in the membership being able to learn. But it was planned for September, but I think that it's probably a bit early because people have so much fatigue. And everything. In the meantime, we were the only ones that were giving something away for free in the membership. But in the meantime, everybody is giving everything away for free. So there's lots of choices for people.
Yeah.
Go other places. So there is definitely the whole learning and development field is totally being disrupted. And so thank God I don't have to worry about a business model, which is good. But it actually, I don't know if you know that 8 years ago, I was paralyzed for a year. And so that's when I stopped, my weekly travel to do keynote presentation and reinvented my business into an online hybrid form of learning. And so I've had 8 years to make that transformation. And it was always the idea that when I was retired, I was going to spend, 3 times 6 weeks out of the year being busy with that. So now it's actually being implemented. So
you manifested that. That's so awesome.
Yeah. It really changes your life when you can't move. So that was my structural break there,
That was a big reawakening. Wow. That was that was a sign. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you're looking good and healthy.
Yeah, well, getting there. So
good.
Yeah, and I do have another kind of book that I was researching, and I finished about 50% of the research, but I've put it aside right now. And that is on mental health and well-being in the workplace. So you might be interested in some of the things.
I'd say that's going to be real big.
I know. And, we worked on it already for, my research assistants and I for about 1.5 years, and we couldn't find hardly any material, and then it suddenly exploded. So I put it aside because I'm not sure now if I have enough for a book, but I'm not sure if I have enough for making a decent book out of it. So.
Well, it is needed.
Yeah. But I'm not sure. I think I probably need to work with a psychologist and a psychiatrist to really make sure that it also has those components in it. So from a behavioral science perspective, I feel pretty comfortable, but not from the medical perspective yet.
Right. Yeah, that adds a different category to it. Sometimes that can get almost too medical, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, you can translate it. That's probably one of the skills that I have, is translating other disciplines into HR words. So, because I really don't believe that the companies are paying enough attention. The data is that 1 in 5 workers is either under treatment or has, it's just skyrocketing, and we haven't gotten data since the coronavirus. So it's probably now. Either it can go both ways. It can be that now they're mentally stronger than they've ever been because there is a crisis.
Right.
And they have to cope. But then when the crisis is over, the collapse will be twice as hard.
So what about the role of telemedicine, like teledoc?
Yeah. Well, I've been very involved with International SOS with telemedicine.
Mm-hmm.
for the last 10 years. So it's not only telemedicine. I mean, the mental health apps in the workplace are doing very well. It's very, very well.
Yeah.
So there's a variety of, but that's just such a complicated topic, and it took me 25 years to really get this topic together. Sometimes it takes me a lot of time to really think it through. I'm not the one that just likes to publish something because it's just out there, and sometimes it's good to be the first market entrant, even if it's not as good as you want it to be. So perfection has its side effects.
Well, the slogan, ready, fire, aim. Later.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can do it again.
Yeah. All right. Well, I gotta go.
Ciao.
Thank you so much.
Ed. Very nice meeting you. I'll try and reach out to you for sure.
Sounds good.